Hey folks, I'm going to give it another minute or so before we start. I'm just pinging Josh Burkus to see if he might be coming because he'd had a number of bits of feedback around the survey and was hoping to be able to close on that. Just seeing if he might be showing up. All right, it's 2 past. I'll go ahead and get started. Today is February 4th, 2019. This is Working Group LTS. The meeting is being recorded. We'll upload it to YouTube. The meeting minutes agenda topics are in the Google Doc. As always, ask that everybody adhere to the community code of conduct and be good people. So I guess first, if just a reminder to drop your name in the attendees. Second, we exist. 2 weeks ago, we sort of talked about whether we keep pushing on work group formalization or not. And frankly, by last week, I was kind of done with putting time into that and had pretty much kind of decided I wasn't going to be giving it any more time. And then suddenly things came together. So the PR merged, it got sufficient LGTMs from people who wanted to see at least the discussion move forward, see where things go. So hooray. Next thing on the agenda, the survey draft. We spent a lot of time talking about this in the last meeting, and then there were a bunch of comments on the doc. I think we've mostly resolved them, but the bigger picture thing that came out of it is like, is this too complicated? And I think there were multiple voices saying yes, but I know, Josh, you'd had some thoughts on that. Do you want to share them?
Well, the one thing was that I kind of feel that this survey is a candidate for having two different decision trees. You know, one where if somebody says they're a hacker or a vendor or a host, you know, somebody working for Kubernetes company, they go down one set of questions, and that set of questions has to do with what they see happening in their general user base. And the other one is if somebody is an end user or a consultant or someone else who's going to have hands-on production clusters, that they go down the other decision tree, with the idea that we could have slightly fewer questions for each group, because some of the questions are only relevant for one group, or some of the answer lists could be made shorter if the question was only targeted at one group.
That makes sense to me. I don't know if that I'm not a data scientist, so I don't know like to what extent that could change what we learn from the data. But if we really think there's two disjoint sets of people to where half and half-ish of the questions are irrelevant, then it points that way.
Well, or to put it another way, if all recipients were going to receive all questions, I would actually want to rephrase some of the questions. Because I mean, like, for example, what upgrade philosophy do you prefer, right? For an end user, that's a perfect question. For somebody who works for a vendor, that question really needs to be, what upgrade philosophy do your customers prefer? You know, or do most of your customers prefer? right? Because that's going to be their answer. And otherwise, what happens is when you have a question that doesn't quite target the person who's answering it, they often either tend not to answer or to give an answer which is basically a random pick, which then throws off your results.
Yeah, even that example, I feel like there's more nuance there that could be informative. Like the customer focus is definitely good, but then the vendors, I wonder if they've already sort of mentally segmented and are vending towards their current customer set because of the way they've chosen to attack it from an engineering perspective.
Well, yeah, in which case we want to ask what that perspective is, right?
Yeah, yep.
We want to find out.
So it's like, then it becomes two questions, like what is your opinion as a vendor, but then what do you see reflected in your customer base if it's different? It's hard because a lot of these are kind of fishing, and we want to guide the answer a certain direction, but also fish open-endedly.
The other thing that I would like to do, because I don't see getting away from making this a relatively long survey, right? The only way that we could actually make it a short survey is if we did a series, right? If we actually chopped it up into 3 or 4 surveys that we were going to do over a few months, which we could do. The drawback to that is that, the same group of people won't answer all of them. And so we kind of lose the correlation factors. I think instead a better thing to do would be to offer some kind of prizes. Figure out some kind of prizes we can get funded by somebody, the CNCF, somebody else, and then I could probably put up one prize and do a drawing, and that gives people. That won't get more people to answer the survey, but what it will do is it gives people an incentive to finish the survey once they've started. The tough part about that is that delivering prizes worldwide can be challenging.
It also requires it to not be anonymous if they want to be eligible, which...
Yeah, well, so we put that in a blank. We say, if you want to be eligible for prizes, please put your email address here.
I think we did discuss in the past where we thought of using this as the first survey and then maybe releasing another survey later and what we learned from this data. So it was like, this is the first time we are doing a survey. We don't have a lot of experience with doing surveys as a group and also as a project. So maybe slow this out sooner and then learn from this experience and build a better survey next time, or more deeper survey that cuts the cake even more finer.
I wonder if we might be able to, based on initial responses, kind of discern a couple of modes in the responses and pull out some seemingly representative folks to engage more in discussion as opposed to survey, assuming they've chosen to not be anonymous in their results.
I would definitely have I am open to being contacted, here's my contact information type of thing in the survey.
Yeah, the last question has that. If you want to be contacted, this is the email.
Mentioning that it's the last question and scrolling down to it, it's question number 21 at this point, and it's like on the 7th page or something.
Yeah.
Part of that is visualization, like the multi-choice, how you do stuff. But yeah, I think that points at an unanswered decision, like what tool are we going to try to put it in and see like how long does it turn into like a 20-page questionnaire, and do we estimate it takes 20 minutes or 30 or 40 or what to go through. Dhaval, had you played around with putting the questions in a tool?
Not yet. I reached out to Ihor about the tool, and I don't think I've received a response from him. I'll send another email.
I'll tell you the challenge with using the CNCF SurveyMonkey instance is that for whatever reason, only CNCF full-time staff are allowed to actually have their hands directly on it, which is going to make it difficult to do a complicated branching survey because you'll have to talk a CNCF staff member through each set rather than being able to try things and see how they work out.
It's a good point. I think I asked those questions to Ihor and I haven't heard back from him. So George was volunteering to see if he can help us on this survey and communicate with CNCF. So I'll reach out to George also and connect with everyone.
I mean, if you don't
George
want to,
Castro?
Yeah.
Okay.
if you don't want to be blocked on individuals, you can just use Google Forms, and everybody has edit access.
So I guess we need a. It would be good if we made at least kind of a general go no go on the set of questions ish, but then so we know that there's not going to be major edits still to come. But then try and I guess have a couple of us put it in SurveyMonkey, Google Forms, maybe try and make a branching and see what it feels like. Because that's like a significant time investment for somebody to go monkeying around with those specific tools, and if we go change the questions too much, it makes it hard to re-edit the implementation.
Yeah, I can play with the tool and see what's possible.
I'd be
I'll
happy
probably
to try.
update the Slack channel so that others can comment, suggest.
I heard another voice very quietly there.
Sorry, that was me. I was saying I'm happy to give Google Forms a try if
Okay.
that's an option we want to explore.
Josh, do you recall if we had trouble with folks in China accessing Google Forms, or are those okay?
No, you pretty much assume that if you're doing Google Forms, you're excluding the Chinese.
That's not true for SurveyMonkey, one presumes.
No, we did SurveyMonkey for KubeCon China and got quite a few responses. And the problem is that, like I said, I'm guessing the reason why the CNCF insists that it's one of their staff to do it is that there's only one account and that account is administrative. And then there's the whole PII problem. But unfortunately, if we want to do the kind of survey that we really want to do, it requires a SurveyMonkey paid account. They lock down a lot of the more advanced survey features and reserve them for paid accounts.
Yeah, I'll talk to Ihor and George and see what's possible. Maybe you can do a Zoom session and then take their help. I'll reply to you guys on the Slack channel.
Well, in any case, I mean, the current set of questions is thumbs up from me. Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure how we should coordinate the thumbs up LGTM process for the survey questions, but I mean, I do think that it's probably past time that we get into some sort of implementation. I'm worried about the perfect being the enemy of the good with this, because it's taken a long time to to get a survey sort of ready. I think that some information is going to be better than waiting another month or so on getting it exactly perfect.
Yeah, I think we did time bound the survey period last meeting. We decided this week would be the last. This meeting would be the last day. So yeah, I think that is a good way of saying the survey needs to be.
Okay, well, in that case, Double, if you can work with the CNCF people to see, and maybe even try on a free account just to compare, like how undermined it would be, I guess, on a free one, just to compare. And David, if you could try putting them in a Google form, and then send a message to the mailing list, and we can have people kind of look at how it feels.
Works for me.
Okay. And then hopefully if we can iterate on that asynchronously over the next week or so, then in our meeting in 2 weeks' time, hopefully we can kind of feel like we have something workable, and maybe best case be thumbs up sending it out in 2 weeks' time. But I totally hear what Nick says. Like we've been discussing specific questions for almost 8 weeks now, so at some point we got to move it forward, say good enough.
Is there any reason why we wouldn't think about sending the survey out multiple times?
Do you mean in terms of like multiple variations, or send it out, see what we get? Just like
Send it out again, yeah, try again.
Oh yeah.
Hit people up at the conference booths. I'm thinking the first time we send it out isn't the last time, so we can afford to take a bit of a risk.
Yeah, I think we've talked about, I don't know that we have like a specific list of all the places where we intended to advertise it, but we talked about kind of doing some hands-on reaching out within our own individual networks, even just like, hey, I know so-and-so runs a cluster, make sure that they have filled the thing out, and just kind of pester people a bit where we can, to, instead of just sending it out to mailing lists and hoping, but to like be a little more hands-on on people, because we're not looking for like exactly a scientific random distribution of responses, as much as like trying to get actual users. So if you know somebody, getting them to respond is valuable.
Yeah, that's a large part of what I'm hoping to do with the APAC time zone call, is to try and pull some of the people that I know are using Cube for reals into, make them aware and make them actually answer this.
Yeah, I think I actually have a topic on the agenda for this. So.
Okay. Well, should we move on to the next topic then? So Jordan, I saw you typing some stuff there, and I'd gone and looked at the issue, and I didn't see like anybody having stepped up just yet on ownership, but I feel like that's like there's a project management ownership-y part here, like to delegate and see if we can have some specific people like reaching out to specific SIGs.
Yeah, most people probably don't see GitHub notifications, and that's all that they would have seen from these so far. So I think there are, SIG node, SIG API machinery, cluster lifecycle, release, and testing, maybe scheduling. So basically the ones that kind of own the release and cluster lifecycle process, and then the ones that own these particular components being discussed. Reaching out, at least in Slack, maybe even in one of those meetings would be helpful. So if there are people who are already attending those meetings who want to kind of take these topics, the relevant ones from that umbrella issue, that would be helpful. I can do the ones for SIGArch and SIG API machinery. So I will throw my name in here. And if people want to grab others, node, scheduling, cluster lifecycle, test, release, putting names here would be helpful.
So I guess that's a call to everybody on the list. If you glance through the set of the 6 issues, 6, 7, I can't count, 7. Look, if you tunnel into the individual ones, you'll see the label for SIG, whichever. If that's a SIG with which you have an affinity, ask you to maybe take that one up onto the agenda of the next meeting. So like Lubomir, I know your SIG cluster lifecycle associated, the one there would be one to try and get on, or the 2 there would be ones to try and get some attention on the agenda in the meetings. And I wonder, I don't know if this quite calls for a project board or something, but I can make like a little table of status and names or something for the agenda, to just for us to have a little bit of visibility and highlight ones that aren't.
And as we're doing this, if it gets onto an agenda, just throw a link into the issue, say, hey, we're going to be talking about this on this day, here's the link, and then maybe take the outcome of that and kind of summarize it and put it back into the issue with a link to the date or call or agenda, just so we can, people who are interested, who do happen to see GitHub notifications, there's like 7 of us, we'll be able to follow those and actually jump into conversations when they happen. That'd be great.
And even if the notifications are missed, it gives a cookie crumb trail for the inner linkages of things after the fact. To, if somebody's looking at the issue and they see a link to the minutes of Sig Fu on such and such date, they might be able to go find conversation or the Zoom meeting.
Is that like a more attractive breadcrumb trail? Okay.
I follow the entire website repository, by the way, so I'm one of those crazy people that see everything.
Lubomir, you're a machine. I don't know how you do it.
He doesn't sleep. That's what I've heard.
Yeah, well, 5-6 hours at least.
Okay. Anybody else want to chime in? Anything related to those? Jordan's typing some stuff in the agenda and Nate putting names next to some of them, links.
So with respect to the same topic, we decided, we thought about writing a KEP or something before we actually reach out to SIGs and say, hey, this is what we wanted to do. Do we want to create a document that summarizes the goals around this issue, or is GitHub issue a good way to drive this?
I think I see this set of issues is like, what are we doing today? And the survey kind of gets at what would people like. But for me, it feels a little premature to jump from those two to what should we do.
Yeah, I think the documentation thing is trying to go get knowledge out of people's heads and get them to write it down and make sure that the same knowledge and expectations match. And where there's mismatches, we like surface those and figure them out. So I think the very act of writing a KEP would do many of the same things this is trying to do, but would probably be overly formal. Like we're not actually trying to change anything. We're trying to understand what is it that half the people in the project already assumed everyone was doing and should be doing. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we're solving the information discoverability problem about versions queue, right? Like speaking as someone who is half a world away from everyone else, it can be tricky to find this stuff without good surfacing.
No, I agree. These issues make sense. No matter what the survey results come out, these need to be well done. So I was just thinking ahead. If we have a document that we already started, it's easier.
Yeah, I don't want to get the documentation of current state bogged down in agreement about how things should change. Like that first pass was very useful to get merged into the website. I think getting these details described and nailed down as well as quickly as possible would be very useful as well. Changes require more thought and more agreement, which is fine, but I don't want to keep information from users until we've agreed on the perfect path forward.
Also, it might be a good idea before sending the KEP to use Google Docs as a platform so that this group can, we can approve it locally and only then send the KEP for like the actual process of LTS.
At the point that we get to that sort of stuff, I think there's a good model in what some of the other working groups have done where multiple different documents of sort of straw man proposals or descriptions of current state and starting then to get more towards a specific desirable future were drafted and bounced back and forth, lots of comments and discussion. Like if you look at the multi-tenancy working group, they had maybe 4 or 5 different documents that lived over many, many months, discussed back and forth, and things trying to bubble up and commonize out of them. I think the Google Docs, as much as it's not open to everybody, is a really handy platform for enabling that sort of collaborative drafting in early days of things.
Yeah, I think there's also an overhead of KEPs because with the new SIG release process that you need to have KEPs for each of these issues before they get merged. You will have a major KEP from the working group, and then each of these GitHub issues would have KEPs. So anyway, all the owners would be like, I mean, there's an overhead of writing lots of KEPs for this just. So I think I agree. Maybe we can use this issue and then start writing motivations in another doc and use issues as this driver.
I think when people hear the LTS word, they immediately assume some big grand vision for a type of support stream. But one of the things that I've liked in the enhancements process right now in 1.14 with people having to propose KEPs, there's a lot of smaller KEPs. It's more point specific improvements that are easier to read and digest and then get approved for implementable state and start making movement towards completion. So that might be a model to keep in mind, trying to make sure that we're doing smaller, simpler stuff, even though people might assume that this is some grand thing. I think a grand long-term solves all the problems vision that's highly ambitious.
Yeah, I think even with KEP, the word itself sounds like a heavy-duty task. So yeah, if the pattern is that people are writing smaller KEPs, it makes sense to write a lot of them. And the project board you mentioned also makes sense. It will also give us an overarching view of what's happening and what's the status. So.
Kind of related to this, I was reminded yesterday, people were kind of emailing and tweeting and Slack mentioning the CNCF's annual report, and it had a page about API Snoop, and I wonder if that's something that we should be looking at here as well. I don't know if that is something, Jordan, that had kind of informed any of your thinking about this.
No.
It seems I didn't think so necessarily, but it starts maybe getting at some of the gaps. There's what's going on today, but then part of that, like conformance and testing and coverage, and where if we're going to invest people's time in driving improvements, which of those, and they so I'll just drop a link to.
Yeah, I think the API Snoop did start from the SIG testing work, SIG. So I can take a look at it and update us next meeting saying how does it impact? Does it make sense to include work on it, etc.
One of the things that specifically caught my attention was if you go to their GitHub page, there's like a embedded Google spreadsheet, and I downloaded a copy of that and then just like did a grep for alpha, well, a CSV copy, grep for lines that begin with alpha, beta, and stable, and piped it to word count -L. And of the tracked APIs, it's almost half and half, beta and stable. But that doesn't necessarily say that all of those things that are beta are critical core ones to invest in, but it was just interesting to see that in terms of numbers from a scale perspective.
Yeah, along with that too, there's a fair amount of noise as far as like we have some resources that are actually both in beta and stable endpoints, and so if you're using deployments, there's like a 50-50 chance whether you're using it via a beta API or a stable API. And so one of the things I'm actually driving is the plans to finish flushing out the stuff in the extensions v1 beta 1 API group and like get a plan to stop serving those probably in the 1.16 timeframe. They've been deprecated since 1.8 or 1.9. And so hopefully as we start kind of removing some of those long deprecated beta versions, we'll get better signal there so that maybe we'll realize, oh, you know what, actually 3/4 of the things that we're verifying are stable and the things that people are depending on are stable. So just a note that there is noise in that dimension.
Yeah, that is cool. Is there a issue, or is that just something on the back of your mind to poke at over the next while?
there is a mega issue. Let me link that in. Sorry.
Collaborative editing of the same
Yeah, really.
the same file at the same time.
So great, so high velocity.
All right, I will glance through that issue later, but linked in the minutes, mega issue indeed.
And with that in particular, we actually just hit a milestone where we have green CI with the extensions, all the deprecated workload APIs disabled. So everything that is required for CI and conformance and all the add-ons and the add-on manager and so many things required updating. That has all been done. So we have green CI with this now, which is awesome.
That's cool. So one thing that I've kind of felt unclear on, it seems like it's been a steering committee level focus to push on performance. Like there's a sub-project formally around that, but it's, are there, like how's the project management aspect of stuff working? Like there's a couple of these mega issues, or how could people get involved in contributing on that, all of that work? Or know that it's there, discover it, next tasks?
I think there is a working group. It's called Working Group Conformance.
Under there, okay.
Yeah, it kind of depends on what direction you come at it from. If you are coming at it from the top and you just say like, I'm interested in conformance, how can I help? Like there's lists of things around, like some of the Windows stuff, trying to figure out how to navigate conformance issues across platforms. There is some of the beta GA questions about like, as things go to GA, making sure they're represented in conformance if they're required. And then the question of what do you do for things that are GA but optional? So there are some kind of high level questions there if you're interested. If you're coming at it from the bottom, right, you're working on a particular feature and you're saying, oh, let's graduate this, kind of the same questions but from the opposite direction. Like is this a thing that is expected to be in all clusters? If so, then it needs a conformance test to represent it. Is it optional? Then it needs E2E tests, and it kind of goes in that bucket of like, we have E2E, but it's not in conformance yet because we haven't figured out profiles. So
how do we deprecate things? Do we deprecate APIs or do we deprecate features? How do we, I find it difficult to quantify or point to a feature that this is a feature.
So there's the deprecation policy goes into a fair amount of detail. I will link that as well. APIs are the best defined because they have a life cycle and like a timeline associated with it. There's kind of a catch-all bucket at the end of that document that says behavior that is not associated with an API or a command line flag should function for a year after announced deprecation. So that's kind of been the catch-all bucket of you have to give people a heads up and you have to wait a period of time. That's kind of a put it in the release notes and then wait a year and then delete it, which isn't great in a lot of dimensions. People don't always read all 80 pages of release notes. And it also doesn't necessarily mean you've gotten the feedback about what the impact of removing this will be. And so that catch-all bucket is there. It's intended to make sure we don't do things quickly, but I think that can still, there still needs to be a little bit more guidance around like how do you get feedback on why it's being removed? Is it being removed because it's causing technical problems? If so, that needs to be communicated out well. Is it being removed because we think no one's using it? If so, how do we know that no one's using it? Did we actually check? So there could probably be some better guidance there about like due diligence as we're kind of waiting out that year. So.
Anything else folks want to talk about on the API side of the house? Well, let's talk then a little bit about where, if we're looking at maybe having survey draft in tool almost ready to go in 2 weeks time, if we're lucky, where, like building out a list of where we send it. Dhaval? This was your one, right?
Sorry, I was muted. Yeah, I had a couple of opportunities I thought I can share with everyone. I learned recently that there is a CNCF end user community. Tim's on Slack has provided me a contact. So when the survey is ready, I'll probably forward the link to the contact. It's on the working group LTS channel. So the other one is Kube Days. Last time, I think Josh and others, Dims and Josh and everybody had mentioned that there is this 1 day KubeCon kind of event happening in different parts of the world right now, which kind of reaches out to audience that cannot make it to KubeCons. So there is one happening in Bay Area. I'm one of the organizers for it. So also it's a 1 day event where around 250 people would come, and so it would be nice. I mean, I'm gonna have a laptop and link over there for any kind of CNCF surveys Kubernetes project related surveys that need to be done. So I'm reaching out to other SIGs to see if they want to use this platform for the surveys, and I'll probably put the survey link if we have something in 2 weeks. The Kube Day is on Feb 23rd. So this is this is another platform I'm going to reach out, make sure we have a wider audience. If anybody has any, it's not Ihor who is the point of contact from CNCF. I think it's Cheryl Hung I can share the Slack link.
Yeah, I see it in Slack now, yep.
Yeah, so I can reach out to her, CC the list, and whenever we have the link available. But yeah, if you guys have any Kube Days near you happening, let us know. Meetups or Kube Days, that should be a good place to do surveys to folks.
So I put in a couple of more obvious ones, like sending it out to the KDev mailing list, mentioning it on Kubernetes Dev Slack, us individually pinging folks. I think Contribex had volunteered to spread the word through their channels.
Yeah, I'm thinking of reaching out to some people at VMware who do the surveys regularly to the end user community. So yeah, those are some of the channels we can also reach out.
Yeah, and as I said earlier, there's a couple of groups in Australia that I'll be able to reach out to. And yeah, I was made aware of the existence of the CN Dev channel on Slack as well, so I'll ping things in there too.
Tim, will you be able to talk to any of the VMware Kubernetes customers?
Yeah, Dhaval mentioned he was going to talk to some folks, and we have we've got multiple products, and our product folks, I'm hoping to be able to get them to represent their customers' viewpoints. Oh, and this reminds me, off the top of my head, I don't remember everybody's affiliations, but one of the things that came up in merging the into the SIGs YAML was we needed a quorum of steering committee votes in favor. And looking through the steering committee list, it dawned on me that just sort of looking at the spread of companies and vendors that are represented on the steering committee list, those larger vendors aren't all represented so far in activities in this work group. So Microsoft is one that stood out in particular where we hadn't gotten people. So it's something maybe to think about which major vendors should we try and get somebody coming around and engaging from. Because I can rep my own, but we need others as well, right?
I think a few months ago, I did speak to Arun from Amazon AWS. But I don't think we have any representation from them. I can kick out some more conversations there.
I'd glance at the minutes of the attendees, for example, at the KubeCon BOF in December, and most of the bigs were represented, I feel like, but Microsoft was one that I noticed wasn't. Well, anything else people want to talk about today?
So if we want to reach out to different vendors, maybe we should go to SIGs. There are cloud provider SIGs that we could actually go to and represent the presentations that we have done to other SIGs and probably invite them to the working group. That should help. Maybe something you can put as my action item. Maybe I can choose at least one before next week and go talking about it.
I wonder if this is another area where we almost need a layer of sort of project management, or if nothing else, like a simple spreadsheet table just to list out some particular things and know who's going to go to which one to do. But we can talk about that in the next meeting, I think, because we need to solidify the content in the meantime.
I mean, you can basically ping the SIG chairs of cloud provider, and they will delegate any questions and topics you have instead of pinging basically attending every single cloud provider meeting.
There's not too many of them right now. And that, I don't know, I feel like getting on a meeting agenda like that's one way to definitely know you got attention, because pings are easy to get lost in noise.
Yeah, and I've seen that the SIG chairs are not always representative of their entire SIGs on all topics, right? So it's good to go and talk to some of the SIGs at least, the major vendors at least. I mean, those who have a SIG cloud provider. There are, I think, 3 or 4, so it's easier to go there and talk to everyone and have a wider audience. Especially when we have the survey, it's much easier to reach out there.
Yeah, I definitely wouldn't want to just find out that we'd pinged SIGs and the SIG chair filled it out themselves, but hadn't given broader visibility to it. All right, well, we can continue to brainstorm that a bit in the meantime. And so Dhaval and I think, so Dhaval and David, if you do sort of a draft and send it out sometime over the next week just to the working group mailing list, we can provide feedback asynchronously and see what we can get drafted up for the next meeting.
Good
Cool.
to me.
All right. Anything else anybody wants to talk about? Last call? Okay, cool. Thanks. I'll upload the video in a bit and have a good rest of your day.
And
Happy
I'll
Tuesday.
go through the draft survey, and I'll mark questions that look audience specific to me. And once we have all those marked, we can see whether or not it really needs to be split into a branching survey or not.
Okay. And I do like the idea of limiting it to 2 branches, hopefully. Like we had a lot of potential personas, but I don't want to split it like 20 ways or something.
Yeah, I mean, not having been through the question exercise, I really see 2 audiences, right? You know, vendors, hosts, etc., people who deal with large numbers of customers, and consultants and end users who are dealing with 1 to a few customers.
Makes sense. All right, bye.